Welcome to Popes and Pylons. Today we're not playing, this video we're not playing any games. So if you're looking for a Let's Play, check out my other videos. This is not it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to talk a little bit about innovativeness in Europa Universalis IV and why I'm often hesitant to take technology ahead of time to get that innovativeness. Now, things have changed a bit with Leviathan, so we're going to have to discuss two sort of scenarios. One in which Leviathan is, or patch 1.31, I think, is enabled, and one where you're playing on an older version like we are in our current Genoa campaign. And most of my, essentially all of my intuition sort of playstyle things I've been doing are based on the pre-Leviathan values. The reason that's important is because in Leviathan, innovativeness was doubled. Innovativeness gain, at least from technology and ideas. So you used to get +2, now you're getting +4 from taking a technology first, and plus what used to be +1 from ideas, now it's +2. Now, they also increased the window of time that you have in which to take the things to still count as first, but that is not going to be important for our discussion here. Overall, there's going to be a lot of stuff that we're ignoring for our discussion. One is innovativeness effect aside from the all power cost one. So Army Tradition Decay, Navy Tradition Decay. These are cool things to have. Nothing I'm going to be looking at all. And the other thing is that I'm only going to focus on gaining innovativeness from taking technology early on. Reason is, ideas you should almost always just take. There's no ahead of time penalty for ideas, and if you have an idea group, you probably want to take those ideas as quickly as possible anyway, so there's really essentially no reason not to grab an idea when you get that plus innovativeness bonus. So this is not up for discussion here at all. Being ahead of time in technology is good. Not taking it ahead of time, being ahead of time in technology for the monthly gain is just good as well. It doesn't cost you anything. So you should probably just do it. And if you have one-time boosts from events and stuff, then you have to see how much it costs you to do it in that event. So the one thing we can really math out is technology. And there we're going to have to look at the +2 and +4 versions, depending on whether you are in Leviathan land or not. So what's the baseline? What does innovativeness do? For our sake, it reduces all power cost by 10% if you have 100 innovativeness. So every innovativeness reduces all power costs by, what's that? 0.1% math, or 0.001 as a multiplier. And I think it's time to just jump over to our beloved Excel and have a look at what I prepared here. Now, this is not particularly beautiful, but I'm going to explain what I'm doing, and I hope the math is going to come out. There are going to be some assumptions we have to do. And the question is mainly how many Monarch points are we going to get over the rest of the game? Because you're spending some amount of Monarch points in order taking the technology ahead of time, which costs more Monarch points, 10% per year you're ahead of time. You're spending those in order to gain that innovativeness. Yes, and to have the technology earlier and that, but we're going to ignore all that, just for the innovativeness. So you're spending Monarch points to get a reduction of future Monarch points. So the question is, how many future Monarch points, or how much future Monarch points spending do I need to have before that was worth it? And luckily enough, players are sort of bound to spend all their Monarch points in the run of the campaign. I mean, sure, there's going to be some overspill from being ahead of time or being over the cap at some point, and maybe you don't spend all of them at the end of the campaign, but that's all minor running errors. We're just going to ignore all that. And this is actually the baseline that Peter, who suggested that I should do such a video here, based his calculations off as well, is that a player spends all the Monarch points they get. Therefore, the gain from innovativeness is simply the amount of Monarch points I can expect to gain from now to the end of the game, wherever that's going to be, multiplied by the reduction factor that we have. You can see over here on the right, 100 points of innovativeness give us 10% reduction, so 0.1. Don't be surprised by the comma here. That's because this is a German computer, and Germans are weird about their decimal points. And so 100 points is 0.1, so 1 point is 0.001. Easy enough, right? So if we have a certain amount of Monarch points we're going to spend until the end of the game, let's say these 95,000 here, which I'm going to explain in a minute, then we can expect that every point of innovativeness we have gains us 95 Monarch points over the whole course of the game. You don't get that immediately, of course, you just get it bit by bit by bit by bit in savings until the end of the game. So this part of the calculation is kind of fixed. The main question is, how many Monarch points are we going to spend in the rest of the game? Which is essentially how many Monarch points are we going to get during the rest of the game. And then how many Monarch points does it cost us to actually take tech ahead of time, and what's better. And then there's going to be some more things to discuss, which we're going to get into in a moment. But let's just have a look at the baseline. So what I've done here, this 95,000 Monarch points, is the amount one could expect if the whole game from 1444 to 1821, you have a ruler with 333 stats, which is the average ruler. Peter had a 444 ruler in his example, but the average statistically, unless you're a lucky nation, is 333. If you're a lucky nation, you're like 3.5, 3.5, 3.5 or something, but let's just go with a normal nation. There's also extreme regencies and all that. That's a whole nother bag of chips there. On average, a ruler has 9 pips in the game. Again, might be very different if you're playing republics, for example. These are different types of rulers. Just a normal monarchy. All right, so 9 Monarch points per month from your ruler. Then I went for now, these are all variables we can tweak, with 6 Monarch points from your advisors, which is a level 2 advisor in every category, which early on you won't be able to afford. Later on you might be able to afford more, but you can already see that this is very, very fluent, depending on what kind of game you're playing and how you're starting. It's very different if you start as the Ottomans with a lot of money, as opposed to starting as, I don't know, Hissen Kaifer with no money and no ability to afford these advisors. Then if you have estates, which again, we're a monarchy, we probably have, you can get up to 3 points from your estates and from giving them the right privileges. And you can have another 3 points, 1 in each category, from being above power projection. So this is adding up to what I feel relatively generous total of 21 Monarch points per month, which ends up being 95,000 Monarch points over the whole campaign, 1821 to 1444. So let's just take this baseline and let's use the innovativeness factor here from Leviathan. So we get 4 innovativeness from taking tech ahead of time. This is a very generous situation. And let's have a quick look at when it's worth mathematically to take tech ahead of time. You can see down here the number of years we are ahead of time, the cost for taking a tech ahead of time, and this is static. This does not depend on any other technology cost modifiers you have. So being 1 year ahead of time will cost you 60 Monarch points for taking the tech. And then we have the cost per influence. So taking this tech ahead of time, 1 year, assuming that 1 year ahead of time will give us, we will be the first doing this, will give us 4 points. So we're paying 15 Monarch points per point of influence here. And in this case, with all these variables, we will see that after 60 years, this has paid off. After 60 years, we got the same amount of Monarch points back that we would that it would cost us, and then afterwards it's just pure gain. This, in most situations, would be a no-brainer. Most EU4 games go more than 60 years. This is, no matter what time in the campaign, assuming these stats are true, after 60 years it would pay off to take the tech 1 year ahead of time if that made you first. Normally tech ahead 1 year ahead of time does not make you first, of course. So going down the list, obviously it takes longer and longer and longer to pay off. And you if you look at even at these generous stats, if you look at 6 years ahead of time, you will never pay that back within the campaign. Essentially. Barely yes, but almost. Essentially not. 7 years, never. So, assuming this all was true, it could be worth taking tech ahead of time quite often. Because like 4 or 5 years tends to be a thing that gives you the bonus. Sometimes 3, but it feels like 4 or 5 is often what's true, especially later in the game. So if you get the chance to do it at 4 or 5 years, you might want to do it. Given that you still have these amounts of years left in the game, which, is a thing. If we were to look at 1600, for example, as a start date, not 1444, if we started at 1600, then we would only be saving 55, well, let's round to 56 Monarch points over the time we still have in the game. Because we're obviously making a lot less Monarch points from now on, or a lot fewer, because a lot of time already has passed. And by 56, we can see, if we look in our table here, 4 years ahead of time would already no longer be profitable. 3 years ahead of time would still be profitable by a bit if we're actually playing to the end of the campaign, which also might not be true, right? Many of my campaigns end before 1821. And would thereby reduce the timer here as well. Let's say we enter 1750. We're suddenly only making 37.8 ducats. Monarch points here, 38 Monarch points, which means 2 years ahead of time would still be profitable, but everything else would not be. And this is being generous. Let's have a quick look at how that same thing looks if we're running without Leviathan. And we only get 2 innovativeness per technology, then things are pretty horrific. Even assuming a full campaign, so you're doing this in 1444, which you're not, but assuming that, 3 years ahead of time would just barely pay off. 4 years would no longer pay off. So pre-Leviathan, it's very hard to find a situation here, even with these, again, pretty generous numbers, I think. And then if we were to look at anything else like 1600, it's just abysmal, right? We're making a savings of 56 still, which pays off. No, I'm confusing myself here. So even 2 years ahead of time wouldn't be worth it. 1 year would be, 2 years wouldn't. So it's very, very implausible that he'd ever get those Monarch points back in this situation. So 1600, which is totally reasonable, and pre-Leviathan, not a chance. So already the situations in which these things are useful are kind of slim, I would say. It does help a lot if you're playing on patch 131 though, for that bonus innovativeness. But aren't there other things to consider? And yes, there are. There are tons of other things to consider. It's very hard to give a definitive answer here. One thing to consider is that Monarch point gain really is not static. This assumes that from the point we make our decision till the end of the game, we are making 6 Monarch points from advisors, which at the start of the game you're not usually. Making 3 from estates, which at the start of the game you might, and later you might not because you want that absolutism. And power projection at the start of the game, you might not have it, and later you probably have it constantly, or not. Again, this could change in any way. I mean, sometimes you just have no rivals to take for a while, and then you drop below power projection, you don't get these points, right? So this is not static. Generally, I would say it goes up because money makes more points through advisors. And that's something that we could try to model, and I've tried that here on this other screen. So the blue line you see in this graph here, that's the basic income of 21 that we saw, that we modeled before, right? And the orange one is an attempt at a modeling of a linear growth of Monarch points per month, starting at 9 baseline in 1444, because all you have is your ruler, which has an average of 9, and then going up over time until potentially hitting the cap. But I don't think, no, we're not hitting any caps here. Not with this modeling. Now this is obviously an estimate. It's going to change rapidly or very dynamically depending on what kind of campaign you're running. And this might not even be realistic for the average campaign. I could be that my average gain per year is quite a bit higher, let's say 0.1, and so we see a steep rise above our blue line from earlier, and then we'd hit the cap. Now, I think I've modeled the cap incorrectly here actually, because 27 I think does not account for the 3 extra Monarch points from the power projection. Is that right? Ruler stays at 9 on average, but advisors can go up to 15, so we're talking 24 plus 6 is 30, yeah. So the actual maximum, it's not 27, but 30. So you'd see this flatten out a bit later. But 0.1 per year is probably, this steep curve doesn't seem likely at all. Saying that in 1626 you already have maximum amount of Monarch point gain running 555 on your folks. That seems unlikely. So I don't know what the right number is here, but it's certainly not 0.4. But 0.04 seems somewhat realistic for an average game. Again, your game might very much differ. What does it mean though? Why am I talking about this? If this is true, then for most of the game you're actually gaining fewer Monarch points than the ones I was suggesting before when we talked about the blue line. And that means it takes longer earlier to make your money back on the investment. So obviously if you're looking at the full-on game, we see that the sum gained here is a lot less. I think I have that the first, yeah. If you take the dynamic amount, so the orange curve we saw here, add these numbers, we would only make 74,800 Monarch points rather than 95,000 with the other numbers. Obviously this goes up depending on the gain per year, but that's not the only thing, right? Because often we're only going to look at a fragment of this time. We're not going to end in 1821, we're going to start later, and we're also going to want to know how long our Monarch points are sort of going to be stuck. Because we're investing. When we're taking technology ahead of time, we're investing in the future. We're spending Monarch points now so that later on we can have more Monarch points. And the further to the left you are on this orange curve, the longer it's going to take for your investment to pay back. And then I think the real crux of the whole thing comes up. And that is, when do you need those Monarch points most? And I don't think it's in 1750. In 1750, you've beaten up the whole world. I mean, if things go well. And you're just kind of going through the motions most of the time. And your Monarch points, at least if I look at my own games, constantly developing because you have too many Monarch points lying around. That's not the case in 1450 or 1550. That's when I'm scrambling for every Monarch point, trying to take that Miltech so I can beat up my neighbor, trying to take that Admitech so I can take an idea group, etc., right? So early on Monarch points are really, really valuable. Later on they're not that valuable, not only because you get more, but also because things are not as highly relevant. But yeah, you get more. And getting more means in turn that they're less valuable. So spending Monarch points early to get Monarch points late is kind of Sure, depending on the amount and the time it takes to pay it back and all that, I'm totally in. I mean, this channel is called Popes and Pylons because I like investing in economy. And this is investing in economy. It's not money economy, it's Monarch point economy, but it's the same deal. You're investing to get more later on. Spend money to make money. Spend Monarch points to make Monarch points. But the question is, when do things pay off? And yes, 60 years might be fine. Even that might be too much if you're in a pinch. But if you're in a pinch, you're probably not considering taking that tech ahead of time anyway. But anything else? you're probably better off spending in the now so you're bigger later on. Because if you're bigger later on, it's also investment. If you're spending your Monarch points now so you can expand more, then you have more money. And more money can turn into more Monarch points. So this whole static thing here really isn't the case. The question is your investment in innovativeness better than any other investment you can make? And that investment might just be development even just random development and not random, developing in good places might give you the power to beat your neighbor, to then be bigger, have more money, have more Monarch points, get that power projection because you're beating up people, get those extra Monarch points because you got the power projection, and suddenly you're doing better and getting more Monarch points. So what I'm trying to say, I suppose, is yes, especially with the new 4 per tech rather than 2 per tech innovativeness, there are breakpoints where you make, well, you get more Monarch points out of taking technology ahead of time than you're spending. Sure, that's a thing. It's a lot harder when you're running without Leviathan, but still doable to find those places. But is it really the best investment for your Monarch points? That's the question I want to ask. And I think in most cases there are better investments that you can make. Sure, if I'm running a super high profit to no one campaign, I'm steamrolling everybody, I'm running 555 advisors because I just have all that money, and all I have to do with my Monarch points is to do a little bit of development in some random province that nobody really cares about, then maybe I could get more out of taking tech ahead of time because I get that innovativeness, assuming it's early enough in the game. Again, if we're looking at, what are we in Genoa right now? It's like 1750? Let's say 1700. And then 1 point of innovativeness in this situation is only going to save me 30 Monarch points. Now, sure, I'm running full-on advisors. Suddenly it's saving me 43 Monarch points. That is still not even worth taking technology 2 years ahead of time. So this late in the game, nah, no point. Also, what good is it to me if I'm already crushing in 1700 to spend my Monarch points or getting more Monarch points in like 1810? It's not going to do anything, is it? What am I going to spend those Monarch points on in 1810 that's going to make any difference? So overall, I think a good rule of thumb is if you're not running the Leviathan patch, don't bother. If you don't have other reasons to take this technology ahead of time, I'm not saying there are no reasons to do that. Especially military tech can be very valuable to take ahead of time in the right situation. And then sure, grab those innovativeness points as well. But almost always, it's just not good. If you get the double gain, there are more situations which might be nice. Especially if you're in a place where you're feeling like you're not needing your Monarch points right now, and you would like to invest them in the future. Because you know there's going to be like idea groups coming up, but right now you really have nowhere to put your points, then sure, consider it. But even then, consider how much ahead of time you have to take it. And if it's more than 4 years, it's almost certainly not worth it. So yeah, I think that's most of the takeaway there. Obviously we can discuss a lot of the minor factors here. How much of a dynamic gain factor would we be looking at? By the way, down here you see the accumulated gain per year. You see that the dynamic function, as I've put it in, is always worse than the static one that we have been assuming. But that totally depends on this linear gain here. I think if I go to 0.6, we might already see a crossing. Would have assumed there's change. Did I break something? Let's go to 0.1. Must have broken something here. This should have updated. Oh, because this is... Oh, I manually put something in here earlier. I shouldn't have. We go to 0.6 here. Not 0.6, 0.06. 0.06 here. We can see we're almost hitting the same sort of level at the end, but still less overall. Fewer overall points made. No, this is accumulated. Fewer, but not a lot fewer. And if we go to like 0.8, 0.08, then we'd actually have slightly more points made at the end of the game. But this is minute details, right? I don't think any of this really matters for the decision. I think the decision really is, 1, are you getting 4 or 2 points? And 2, are you getting a bargain on this? So are you getting something like 1 or 2 years ahead of time? That sounds like a bargain you might want to take. And 3, do you really have no better way to spend your Monarch points right now? And if you're on the right side of all of these, then sure, grab that innovativeness. Otherwise, I just don't believe it's worth it. And that's all. Thank you so much for watching. If you have comments on this, then certainly do talk to me in the comment section. If I made any mistakes here, missed out on things, which I certainly might have, then please do let me know. I'll correct anything I can see in the comments, in the video description if you bring up any mistakes. And if it's a huge mistake, I might even redo the video. After all, I don't want to spend false information? No, it's not the word. I'm not going to give you false information. Spread is the word I was looking for. I'm not going to want to spread false information here. So do feel free to talk to me about this. Obviously feel free to hit that like button, subscribe button if this is the first time on the channel, because you got just so attracted by an Excel video. Then I do a lot of EU4 Let's Play content, many campaigns in the archives, a running campaign of Genoa with a custom achievement, where we grab trade the honest way from India and get Master of India. But again, tons of other things to see there. So thank you folks so much for watching, and see you folks next time.